In the past Advanced Revit course, which was just last semester, we covered several tools like creating a color-coded plan, different rendering techniques, exploded views in a couple of different ways, using phases and filters and design options, and applying decals, which are images that you can bring into your drawing. These are all a part of the posted presentation techniques from last semester, which I would recommend that you take the time to go through and learn those tools, if you haven't already seen those video presentations, which as of last semester have become part of the EM3 course in the transition of developing the BIM certificate courses. So let's take a look at other graphic presentation techniques. Based on what we did last week, we can open up a family and modify it. So why not modify the title block? You can either create a new family title block from the title block templates here, 11 by 17. That's basically just a 11 by 17 rectangle, or I think a more preferred method would be to open the one family that is already a title block that's 11 by 17 and use some of the text parameters. So here we want to go to families and open in the US Imperial folder, the title blocks folder here. We'll find the 11 by 17 horizontal B horizontal family and open that one. And one of the first things we should do is save it as a different name and put it in your folder structure, your library, so you can save it as and a family and navigate to the folder structure that you're using for your families. It's suggested not to use the Revit folder structure because when you upgrade Revit, or if it crashes and you have to replace it, you might lose some of those files. So create your own library that's outside of the Revit system folders. You can rename it with your own name that you'd like to use. I'm just going to add new after the word horizontal, pick save. And so now when I look at the name of it, I know that I'm inside a different file. And I'm inside this file that has loosely these lines and text that I can use for my own design. Design your own logo based on this 11 by 17 sheet of paper. All of this information is important to us, but it's all based on your design. At the minimum, you should take out the Autodesk logo and go ahead and add your own. So you can go to Insert and pick Image and find an image that represents your own logo. If you don't have one, then maybe create one, because at some point you're creating business cards and deciding on your how you're going to present your name. It can be an image that you put here instead of the Autodesk text. Then save it, close out of this file, and open the file that already has a building created. So a past project that you've worked with in a different class, or the one that you worked with in the first module in this class. You're building your own portfolio, so everyone's will be a little different. You can, like I said, use a past project file also. So here we can highlight sheets, right click and pick new sheets in the project browser, pick the load button and navigate over to that new 11 by 17 sheet that you created with your logo and your design. Once you load it, you can pick OK and call this sheet the title sheet with the letters TS. Each company is different in what they use for this drawing index or title sheet or cover sheet, and you can even create your own family for the cover sheet with a different design. The first thing I'd like to show you here is how to bring a colorful background into the sheet so that you can overlay your images on that background. So we'll go to one of your elevations, and in that elevation we can duplicate it first. So right click and pick duplicate, view, and duplicate, and then rename this view title sheet background and pick OK. And then at the bottom left corner under visual styles, we'll go to graphic display options and change the background to gradient so that we can develop a color, and it's of your choice. For the sky color and the horizon color, we won't be using the ground color, so I'll go ahead and pick apply and I'll pick OK. The idea is here that we can put a check mark and crop view and crop region visible in properties so that we can crop the view and extend it away from the drawing so that now we have this portion of background color that we can bring into our sheet. And then going back to the north view, we can duplicate it again and rename this one title sheet elevation, because we're going to need to change the scale of it so that it's smaller than the actual north elevation. And I'll show you that in the sheets. So we'll go over to the title sheet, and now I can drag and drop this title sheet background onto my drawing. It's large, so I can start to crop it, and the best way to do that is to have these two views open. We can type in WT to window tile all the views and ZA to zoom all. I can close these two and type in ZA and type in WT again and ZA if I need to. And then here in my title sheet, I made this a little bit big so I can go over with them side by side now. I can kind of see how big this blue color background is as I start to stretch it across to fit my paper. Probably could have sized this earlier. That's okay. I'm here. There. Now I won't need a title for this one, so I can click on the title and go to Edit Type, and where it says Show Title, I can change this to No. And now I don't have a title, and I end up with this nice shape that's on the drawing that I can modify. In the title sheet background view, I can go to Annotate and go to the region and pick masking region and use these tools to kind of mask as a choice that view. If I'd like to include an angle on this crop region, the green check mark, it can mask out that piece, and later we'll make this, we'll turn off the visibility of the crop region. So if I want to now pull my title sheet elevation into my title sheet, I can drag it and drop it onto my sheet. But you see it's a little big for my sheet at that scale. So you have a choice of going back to the view or double click right here in the sheet, and you can then activate the view and change the scale. So if I want it to be small because it is a cover sheet, I can make that a scale of 1 inch equals 30 feet or whatever you need for that cover sheet. And now if I right click, I can deactivate the view so that I can bring this drawing into my sheet. So here in the sheet that's the background, you can click on these little break lines and it'll separate the crop regions. And so now you're starting to design your own background color. You can even select this masking and stretch it out too. Now I can, in the background view, take the check mark out of crop region visible, and I've got this nice background design that I can use for my title sheet. Yours can be completely different. Maybe you'd like to have more horizontal lines for your design. It can be whatever you'd like it to be. We can also add images to our title sheet. So here I'm going to go to Insert. I'll close out of, actually I'll just maximize this title sheet. I'll go to Insert and pick Image and bring in an image. What you'll notice is that in the individual views, when you bring images in, you'll have this draw order to bring it forward or send it back. On the sheet, the individual views are always on top of these images. I'd like to clean up this view a little bit, so on the level 1 view, I'm going to add a floor. When I add a floor as a base for my model, and some of you may have projects that have foundations and site topography, which is great, I'm going to edit this floor and duplicate it so that I can have my own base floor that is bigger than the 12-inch and becomes kind of a base for the graphic presentations. A 3-foot base floor. And when I pick Edit, I'm going to change the thickness here to 3 feet. That way, when I am in the elevation view, I'll have something that's a little thicker than that 12-inch and becomes a graphic base for my elevation to sit on. Here I can drag these levels over, and yours may already have all that cleaned up in it. The one thing I would like to show you here is that when I type in VG for this specific view, which is my title sheet elevation view, I can go to floors and override the surface pattern so that it can be a dark black color or whatever color you'd like to use with a pattern that's solid. That way I have this nice black strip that the elevation is sitting on, and when I go to the sheet, it's visually a little better graphics. In this title sheet, we can bring the vicinity map or location map from Google. We can bring that in as an image, file, and we can also start to add a sheet list. So we'll be creating a new sheet. So let's just do that now. So we can highlight sheets, right click and pick new sheet, and we're going to use that new 11 by 17 that we created with your logo and your design already. We can name this one 3D Ambient Presentation or 3D Presentation, and then this could be A1. And we'll have a couple other sheets, but let's go back to the title sheet so that we can start this sheet list. We can go to the View tab and go to Schedules and pick Sheet List. In this schedule, we can pick here Sheet Number and pick Add, and Sheet Name and pick Add. And then we'll come back to this to customize it, but if we go ahead and pick OK, this is our sheet list. We could rename that if we'd like, Drawing Index. And you'll see already that the names of our sheets are in this list. So we can go back to the title sheet and then go in the project browser under Schedules and Quantities and drag and drop the drawing index into our title sheet. As we create new sheets, we'll see them added to this list. We can also create a parameter that helps us to change the sheet order. So let's go back to our drawing index schedule under Schedules and Quantities, and then in Properties we can pick Fields, and in this sheet list properties we'll pick Add a Parameter. We'll call that parameter Sheet Order, and that sheet order will be based on numbering system. So the type of parameter instead of length will be integer, and we'll go ahead and pick OK. Now with sheet order highlighted, we can go to Sorting and Grouping tab and sort by sheet order, and make sure you have here picked ascending and pick OK. Now we have this sheet order column, and these columns can be hidden. So once you start to organize your sheets in a list, you can always hide this column. And here under sheet order, we can start to change the numbers. So if we wanted the title to be 0 and the 3D ambient presentation to be 1, each one of these rows will have these little arrows that we can use to change the number so that our sheets are in the order that we'd like them to be in for the sheet list. When we're done with the sheet list, or we want to print, we can right click and hide this column so that it doesn't appear on the title sheet. And when we need it back, we can then right click and unhide all the columns so that we can continue with the sheet order. This is important when you're working with construction drawings and you have several sheets and a drawing index. We also have guide grids that we can use on our sheets. In the View tab, if we pick Guide Grid and we give it a name, Guide Grid 1, you can select the grid and change its extents to the sheet itself if you'd like by using these small circular grips. And then you'll see in Properties that you can change the grid spacing. If you'd like to change it to from 1 inch to 2 inch, you'll see it change when you pick Apply. Once you set up that guide grid, you can then, when you go to another sheet, if you need to use it for a different sheet, at the bottom of Properties, you can see Guide Grid None. You can change that to Guide Grid 1 and pick Apply, and now you can apply it to that sheet. Go to the 3D view, right-click and duplicate that view, and then rename it Ambient Presentation. There are a few tools that are overlooked sometimes in working with graphic presentations. We've covered most of them in the past class, but here I'd like to show you a couple of different ways of working with those tools. Change your visual display to hidden line and then go back here and pick graphic display options. Here under shadows, we can show ambient shadows. These are those soft shadows that show up at some of the corners and become a little more realistic than the cast shadows. So if I take the check mark out of Show Ambient Shadows and apply, you see the hidden view, and now putting the check mark back in and picking Apply, you see how it gives that soft shadow. You can still cast shadows, and under lighting, you have the opportunity to change here the intensity of the shadows so that they're darker or lighter, depending on what your preference is in your presentation. This is also a great way to bring a little more sun into your other visual displays. The silhouette tool will bring out some of the line work. If I change this back to regular lines and pick Apply, you might not be able to see it right away. But if I get close enough here and do it again, you'll see that when I change this to wide lines and pick Apply, the line work becomes bolder around the edges. And as we said before, if you start to use transparency in the view, you'll notice that the shadows are automatically unchecked. So we'll go ahead and leave the transparency here to 0 and pick OK. But individual objects can also have a specific display. So you see how some of these trees in the background are darker. You can select an element and then right click and go to Override Graphics in View and by Element. That way, by element, you can change the transparency. That's why this tree is a little more like a transparent sketch. You can even select elements like the roof or some of the windows and change. Then right click and go to Override Graphics by Element and change the surface pattern to graphically highlight that element. Another feature that's overlooked is being able to select an object, right click, go to Override Graphics and View by Element and check halftone. Halftone will give you this light image and change the transparency of that object. And now you have several ways of illustrating your drawing based on using halftones, transparencies, surface patterns, all of each element in this view. And in 2015, when you go to graphic display options, you'll see a sketchy tool that will change your drawing into a more hand-drawn look, and you can adjust how sketchy your line work appears. So in the sheet, 3D Ambient Presentation, you can now drag the Ambient Presentation 3D view here to the 11 by 17 sheet. It's going to be large, so we can change the scale. You can double click and change here the scale to something a little smaller depending on your project. Then right click and deactivate the view to get back to your sheet. We're going to take a look at a section perspective. So we'll create a sheet for it. Highlight sheet, right click and pick new sheet, and then we'll rename this sheet section perspective, and it's A2 automatically. The video presentation that follows uses a different project to illustrate section perspectives, but you stay in this project and apply the tools and techniques to create a section perspective.
The concept is to create a camera view, which is a perspective, and then a section box that will crop how much of the depth of the building is shown. Yours will look completely different than this, but the concept will be applied, creating the section perspective and using these tools.
In the level 1 view, I'll go ahead and create a camera view. And in this camera view, we have this crop region, but we also can turn on the section box in the view properties. So here I'm going to put a check mark in section box and pick apply. And now if you roll the wheel back a little bit, you should be able to see that section box. I can then select the section box, and this is kind of the tricky part. We need to find the arrows that represent the front and the back views of the section box. And this one here is going to give you the front edge of the section box so that we can start to bring it back a little ways and start to create here a section box kind of crop of this view. So if I come back far enough, I'll find a point where it becomes a section that's through my building, but still a perspective. I can give it a little bit more depth by just using the section box to control how much I'm seeing of the section. So once you work with these control grips, you can decide on how much of your building is showing and if it's going to have a lot of depth and where the section cut is going to occur within your building. And now we have this crop region. If we wanted to use that to kind of crop out the view, we could do that. We need to type in VG and go to the Annotation Categories tab in order to turn off your section box. If you turn it off over here in Properties, it will turn off the section that we just created. And then we can turn off also the view of this crop region, the visibility of it. We can take the check mark out here and pick apply. So now we have the beginning of a perspective section, and we have to decide on a few things. When we use the shaded view, we can take the earth large scale out by going to the Massing and Site tab and clicking on the small arrow next to Model Site and picking here under the section cut material. Instead of showing the earth, we can take the pattern, the cut pattern, out. So we'll just put no pattern here and pick OK. And now it becomes kind of a nice color for presentation. It's a personal choice, I suppose, and the crop region can be changed also. Unfortunately, in this view, in this kind of camera view, we have less options than in an actual section that I'll show you in a few minutes. But we can change some things like the detailed lines. If I use a coarse, it's going to give me a little different view as the medium and the fine. So medium and fine are very similar. In the graphic display options, we've looked at these tools before, but in this view, this perspective section view, building section view, and you can also lighten up your project a little bit if you'd like to show a little bit more sunlight here in this lighting panel. And of course, you can decide in the sun settings, as we've gone through before, if you want to bring the sun from the top right or top left, or click on still and bring in a specific location, day and time. I'll cancel out of that. We can also change the background as we did before to sky or gradient. Gradient will give you the option of creating different colors for the ground, horizon, and the sky depending on the view. And we can bring in an image. Maybe we want to bring in a sky in the background. You can stretch it or use the original size and change the height. If we type in VG, as a reminder, we can go to the walls, the floors, the roof, and change the graphic overrides. So here I'll go to the walls and click on, for the cut pattern, the override button, and change this to a black or whatever color you'd like, and the pattern being solid, so that when I go back to my drawing, these walls become black. So I could have done that for the floors and the roof to show the section cut in this black darker color. Now, unfortunately, in this view, which is still a camera view showing a section, under the Modified tab, we won't have access to the Join tools. We will have access to the line work, but it's not as clear as an actual wall section. When you use LW for line work, you can change your line work to invisible or thin lines.
For your reference,
Now in a regular section, if I was to go to a building section that's not a camera view, in this regular section that's not a camera view, I can use tools like this join geometry to join the walls and the floor and kind of get that smooth transition from one element to the other. And I can clearly use here the line work tool if I wanted to make some of these lines invisible or even lighter. I could click on invisible lines, and then maybe I don't want to see them. I may have to click on it a couple of times, but then it takes out that line work. If I wanted to add line work, I could go to the Annotate tab and pick Detail Line and draw lines, hidden lines, medium lines, wide lines. And these are all controlled. The line weights here are controlled under the Manage tab. Under Additional Settings, you can go to Line Styles. In this Line Styles dialog box, I can see all of the different line styles that are here in Revit, but you can also create your own based on your presentation. These are the numbers that represent how bold your lines will look and the pattern, the line pattern and color. If you select an element, you can right-click and go to Override Graphics in View by Element. So for this view, just this one element can have these graphic overrides. So for example, the transparency of this one object that I've selected can be modified and different than other elements in this view. This is the one setting that cannot be saved in the view template. If you want to take some of what you've created in this view, the settings, and apply it to another view. So it's kind of the last resort for changing some of the display options because it's only going to be specific to this view. But for this view, if I right click over in the project browser, you'll see that you can create a view template from this view, holding those settings that you've just established, and apply different templates to this view here or over in Properties under View Template. It says None, so we can select from different views those parameters. Of course, turning your shadows on in any view is going to help the graphics, but slow down the drawing a little bit more.